7 words. That's all it took. 7 quiet words from a worn-out waitress to a man who could make her vanish with a single phone call. And the room went still, like someone had turned the sound off. People expected drama, or a slap, or an apology. Nobody expected a reckoning, not that night, not in a place where dinner coats cost more than monthly rent. But those 7 words did something nobody could have guessed. They set a crooked world leaning toward collapse. My name's Maya, and I'm going to tell you a story about being overlooked, about how the person everyone calls help can be the one who notices everything that actually matters. This is a story about pride, cowardice, and a choice on a windy rooftop that decided everything. And it starts in a restaurant called the Gilded Fig right on the edge of downtown Seattle. The Gilded Fig shines like an invitation. Brass fixtures, glass so clean it hurts your eyes, servers who move like they're part of the furniture. If you work there, the first lesson is simple: be invisible. Say nothing, make no waves, smile when necessary, and disappear when not. I'd been doing that for 8 months, trading my voice for tips, covering my debt with overtime, keeping my mom's meds in the mail slot because she couldn't fight the system anymore. Her name's Laura Bennett, once an accountant for a company that used to matter. Now, she lived 2 blocks over in a studio that smelled like the years it had been worn down. That night, the Fig was full of people who wore titles like armor. Lawyers, council members, investors, and at the head of them all sat Richard Hale. You'd see him on billboards and business pages, the kind of man who thinks his reflection is a mission statement. Hale owned half a skyline, a private jet, and a patience for the world that made him dangerous. He was the kind of rich that doesn't need to shout, but he did anyway because power likes to hear itself. Across from him sat a nervous young exec with manicured hands sweating like he'd been asked to swim without knowing how to float. Richard, Hale, was ripping him a new one about a stalled redevelopment deal. The man's name was Ben. He kept stammering, palms damp, trying to explain permits and timelines. Hale slammed his fist and the crystal jumped. "If those permits aren't in by Friday, you can kiss your career goodbye," he snapped. "I'll make sure you never get within a boardroom again." It felt like watching a car crash in slow motion. Forks froze mid-air. Conversation thinned. Managers glanced, then glued their eyes back up like they'd seen nothing. And me, I'm holding a bottle of wine worth more than my car, and my manager Lucas, who sweats like bad coffee mouths, table 7 refill, be careful. I walked over because that's what you do. You approach, you lower your head like a prayer. "More wine, sir?" I ask. He turns, and when he looks at me, it's like being scanned for worthiness. Do I look like I want more wine? He snaps, like he's surprised I exist. You're not paid to think. You're paid to pour and vanish. You're nothing. You get insulted in lots of ways that job teaches you to swallow, but this one landed different. It felt old, deep, like a record that's been skipping for years. I set the bottle down, not clumsily, not apologetic, and I said, slow and flat, "Speak to me like that again, and I will walk away." The room forgot how to breathe. Lucas turned as pale as a napkin. Ben looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. And Richard Hale, he sat back, and for the first time that night his expression wasn't cruelty. It was curiosity, like he'd been handed a puzzle he didn't know how to solve. And then he did something nobody expected. He told me to sit. Yeah, sit at his table, in my uniform with my name tag blinking like a confession. I could have laughed, I could have run. Instead, I sat because something in me wanted to see what came next. He poured a glass for me, never touching my hand, and said in this low voice, "I need someone to watch a man for me. Someone who isn't impressed by titles. Help me read him." He explained, calm as a courtroom, that in 15 minutes a man named Martin Voss would arrive. Voss Enterprises ran heavy industry and darker dealings. Hale said Voss had a tale to sell, a mining claim out in Nevada, and he needed an honest read. "You see people," he said. "You know their tells. Watch him tell me when he bluffs. If you do, I'll pay you $250,000 tonight." You ever hear money and feel dizzy? Yeah, that happened. Debt is a pressure, and sometimes pressure makes people do things they'd never admit. But beneath the offer was something else. Not greed, not only. A look that felt like desperation. So, when the doors swung open and in rolled Martin Voss, flanked by a woman in a red dress with a posture like a sword, I was already on edge. Martin was a spectacle of old age made fashion, thin as a twig sunglasses at night hands that trembled like he had Parkinson's. He slumped in his wheelchair like a man who'd been aired out by life. But I watch people for a living, and there's nuance there you learn if you survive long enough. When a waiter dropped a glass near the Voss table, Martin's hand stopped trembling for a beat, then tapped the armrest twice. A signal. The tremor was a show. I leaned over and said quietly, "He's faking it. Watch his left hand." Hale flicked his eyes in that direction, and something changed. He became a shark in a suit. He started pecking at Voss and the woman, Evelyn Voss, and slowly, methodically the mask they wore came loose. Evelyn's hand trembled despite her collarbones and posture. Her voice clipped. They were bluffing about bids. They didn't have other buyers. They were overreaching. The negotiation that followed was cinematic. Hale didn't shout. He carved. He fed them an offer worse than they'd planned, and they flailed. The room felt smaller, like the Gilded Fig had been reduced to a stage and we were the chorus. Every time Evelyn pivoted, I'd tap Hale's foot, whisper a word. Liar, nervous sweating. And he used it like a partner in a heist. By the time the papers were slid across the table, Hale had what he wanted, and then with this quiet cruelty, Martin Voss spoke. "I want to speak to her, alone, 5 minutes outside." My heart did something weird. My mouth felt like it had swallowed a storm. Outside on the terrace it was cold, the wind biting through my thin uniform like a reminder. Nothing about this is safe. Voss turned his head, and when he spoke, there was no tremor in his voice, no sick act. "You look just like her," he said. "Your eyes, your chin, your stubbornness. Laura Bennett." Every nerve in me made a crooked map back to my mother's name. He started telling a story with dates and ledgers, and a man who used to sit at the same table Richard Hale sat at, a man named Martin who had stolen money, who'd planted evidence and watched Laura's life get pulled away. He'd sent her to prison on charges she didn't commit, and her life had never recovered. And then the real knife. He said Richard Hale knew. He'd known 20 years ago and had done nothing. I felt something disintegrate in my chest. The man at the table, the man who'd just offered me $250,000, could have stopped the world from breaking my mom's life, and he didn't. When I walked back in and asked him, he didn't look like a villain. He looked like a man who'd been carrying a secret like a bar of hot iron for 20 years. He admitted it. The silence, the fear the choices made out of greed or cowardice. But he also told me something I didn't expect. He had been working quietly to fix it. He'd been paying my mom's medical bills, building a case against Voss, feeding evidence to the FBI in secret. He handed me an envelope that felt heavier than money. $2 million restitution, an admission, and a start. Trust cracks when you've been lied to. I wanted to hurl the envelope into the river and scream. I wanted to forgive. I wanted to ask why he'd waited. He said a word I know too well. Fear. Voss was dangerous. Any overt move could have killed more than a reputation. So Hale stayed quiet, collected proof, and waited until he could take Voss down without bringing my mom more harm. You know what choice means when it comes down to a moment like that? Revenge is easy. It looks like clapping when someone falls. Truth is quiet and terrible and heavy. I could warn him about the poisoned land that Voss claimed to be clean, let Hale's company crumble the way my mother's life had, or I could walk away, let Voss's lies surface, and let the law do what it does. I chose the truth. 3 months later, my mother sat in a courtroom and the judge cleared her record. Voss was sentenced to decades behind bars. We opened a small accounting office a year later, Bennett and Ruiz Accounting, helping people who'd been trampled by bigger machines. I never went back to the Gilded Fig, but I took the lesson with me. Small people notice things big people choose to ignore. So where does that leave us? It leaves us with a messy truth. People are complicated, and sometimes the person who hurts you most is the person who also tries later to save you. It leaves us with choices: vindication or grace, spectacle or responsibility. It leaves us asking whether the system that lets the powerful squint and look away is broken beyond repair, or whether enough whispers can become a shout. Now, I want to hear from you. Would you have forgiven Richard Hale? Would you have taken the money and walked? Have you ever watched someone you trusted look the other way and felt the ground shift beneath you? Drop a comment and tell me what you think, right, wrong, or somewhere painfully in between. Share a story if you've lived through something like this, or speak up if you've seen someone else swallowed by power. If this moved you, like the video, subscribe for more stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary, awkward human things, and hit that bell if you want to see the truth get dragged into the light again. And if someone you know needs to hear this, share it. Maybe it'll help them find the words they need to speak. Because sometimes all it takes is 7 words to change everything. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to disappear.